chosen one. You were not born by accident. Heaven didn't flip a coin and hope you'd survive. No, long before you were seen by man, you were known by God. Your existence was etched in eternity. And when you entered this world, you didn't come in empty. You came marked. You didn't just cry as a baby. You carried a sound that echoed in both realms. Earth may have heard a scream, but heaven recognized the arrival of a warrior, and hell took note too. From your very first breath, you bore evidence of divine ownership. There was something about you, something unexplainable. The way you observed, the way you felt things deeper than others, the way you couldn't shake the sense that there was more to your life. That was never your imagination. That was your mark. As Paul declared in his letter to the Galatians, chapter 6, verse 17, I bear on my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. These are not just scars, they are seals. And like Paul, you too carry something that sets you apart in both the natural and the spiritual realm. You may not have physical wounds from chains or persecution, but the emotional weight you've carried, the isolation you've endured, the fire you've walked through, all of it is evidence that you were born marked. Your mark didn't come from man. It wasn't given to you by parents, pastors, or platforms. It was given by heaven, and that means it cannot be revoked by earth. You don't need applause to confirm it. You were chosen before you were visible. You were stamped with purpose before you took your first step. That's why you never quite fit in. From the start, you saw what others ignored. You couldn't laugh at what they laughed at. Even when you tried to blend in, your spirit resisted. Because you were never built for conformity, you were forged for consecration. Some call you too deep. Some say you're too sensitive. But in truth, you are spiritually alert in a generation that's asleep. You feel tension in the spirit when others are just chasing trends. That's not weakness. That's your seal talking. It's your divine imprint exposing what's false. And that seal has cost you. The moment hell identified the mark on you, it launched attacks to cancel you. But they couldn't touch what heaven sealed. You've walked through betrayal, abuse, rejection, but you're still standing. You've cried silent tears, fought private battles, but you're still breathing, still chosen, still marked. Because when God places his hand on you, not even the grave can stop you. That's why you didn't die in what tried to break you. That's why, even when you've fallen, grace kept reaching. You carry too much purpose to stay buried. You are a carrier of divine evidence. There are people who've lived easier lives than you, and yet they crumble under pressure. But you, God, has allowed pressure to shape you, not to crush you. You've been forged like iron. Every heartbreak was fire. Every delay was a hammer. Every lonely night was a reshaping. You are not weak, you are refined. Now, you are awakening. You feel it. There's a divine stirring in your soul that refuses to stay silent. No more downplaying what you carry. No more apologizing for your anointing. There's a kingdom waiting for your obedience. You are not reading this by accident. This is not just another message. This is a divine interruption. Heaven has paused your scrolling, silenced the noise, and whispered, you were born marked. And now, it's time to rise. You have nothing to prove. You are already approved. What you feel isn't confusion. It's calling. God doesn't use perfect people. He uses marked ones. The ones who've bled in private. The ones who've walked through shame and still chose to worship. So stand tall. Wipe your tears. Look hell in the face and declare, I bear on my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. I didn't choose this. It chose me. I didn't earn this. It was written. And I will not walk like I'm common, because I am marked by the uncommon God. Now, if this word pierced your soul, if something inside of you is burning, don't ignore it. That's your mark being activated. Type 777 the comments as a prophetic act that you recognize your seal and you refuse to hide any longer. And if this message spoke to you, like, share, and subscribe, not to support, but to stay aligned with the flow of heaven. This is just the beginning. From the very beginning, you felt it, didn't you? There was something different about you. Something no one could quite explain. You never fit the mold. While other children laughed freely and embraced the world without hesitation, you stood at the edge watching, observing, feeling. There was a weight on your shoulders that others didn't carry, a silence in your soul that couldn't be filled with noise or distraction. Even then, you were marked. You weren't rebellious. You were responsive to something unseen. You could sense the heaviness in a room. You cried when others laughed. You asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, not because you were strange, but because your spirit was awake before your mind could explain it. God had his hand on you before you knew what calling meant. That's why rejection came early. It wasn't your personality, it was your presence. You carried something others could feel but not name. Some drew near, others pulled away. You experienced both favor and attack, not because of who you were, but because of what you carried. And you tried to be like them, to talk, dress, and laugh like them. But the mimicry never lasted. Their fun felt empty. Their friendships didn't feel safe. You were playing a part, but your soul longed for more. Loneliness became familiar, not because you were unlovable, but because you were being set apart. God wasn't punishing you, he was preserving you. Had you been accepted in the circles you wanted, your calling would have been compromised. So, he kept you at a distance, not to harm you, but to protect the treasure within you. Others could blend in. Others could disobey and move on. But not you. When you strayed, conviction came quickly. You weren't just emotional, you were sensitive to the spirit. The leash on your life was shorter. What's inside you matters too much to be wasted. You felt like an outsider, but you were never meant to blend in. Think back. Remember the moments you sat in your room, crying without knowing why. That wasn't depression, it was discernment. You were sensing things without the words to express them. Your tears weren't weakness, they were intercession. You were born to feel the weight of things others ignore. Some called you dramatic or too intense, but they didn't understand what they were looking at. They couldn't see the seal, but hell could. That's why the warfare came early. The trauma, the abuse, the confusion. If the enemy couldn't stop your birth, he'd try to damage your identity. And for a while, he almost did. You questioned your worth. You doubted your sanity. But it wasn't brokenness, it was early activation. Your calling showed up before your confidence did. You weren't broken. You were becoming. David cried out in the book of Psalms, chapter 71, verse 6. From birth I have relied on you. You brought me forth from my mother's womb. I will ever praise you. You didn't just find God later in life. He had you from the womb. That's why darkness never fit you. That's why grace always pulled you back. In the isolation, you learned how to pray. In rejection, how to listen. In silence, how to discern. While others built platforms, you built roots. You weren't missing out. You were being made. Every unseen moment prepared you for visible purpose. God never reveals what He hasn't refined. That's why your path was harder. Your training was sacred. The pain of being different was real. But the purpose is eternal. You didn't just survive, you were sanctified. Now, while others chase attention, you carry substance, oil, wisdom, authority. What disqualified you in their eyes is what qualifies you now in God's. Because chosen one, you were never meant to blend in. And listen closely. The very traits you once saw as burdens, your sensitivity, your intensity, your depth, those are the weapons God is sharpening for this generation. You were never too much. You were precisely what this dark world needs. The light you carry may have been dimmed by trials, but it was never extinguished. In fact, it has only grown brighter. You weren't rejected. You were refined. You weren't left behind. You were being prepared in the secret place. And when God reveals what He has hidden, the world will not see someone who came out of nowhere. They will see a chosen one who was born marked, kept by grace, and now unleashed for divine purpose. Chosen one. Have you ever stopped to realize just how early the battle for your soul began? It didn't wait until you became an adult. It didn't wait until you stood on stages or said yes to ministry. No, the war began when you were still discovering who you were. That was never random. It was calculated. The enemy knew before you did that your life carried weight, so he tried to break you before you could ever rise. The trauma came early for a reason. The enemy saw the seal of heaven before you saw it yourself. He recognized the light you carried and launched an all-out attack, not on your behavior, but on your identity. You were targeted, not because you were weak, but because you were marked. Think back. Why did pain find you so young? Why did fear grip you when others lived carefree? Why were you battling anxiety, shame, insecurity before you even knew what those things were? It wasn't psychological, it was spiritual. From the very start, hell tried to convince you that your voice didn't matter, that your presence was a burden, that your existence was an accident, but none of it was true. And deep down, even in your darkest moments, you knew it wasn't true. You knew you were created for something more, that your life couldn't possibly be meaningless, that even in the nights when you wanted to disappear, something holy held you back. That something wasn't luck, it was the hand of God on your life. It was the mark of divine preservation. The prophet Isaiah proclaimed in chapter 54, verse 17, "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord." Weapons were formed against you, but look again, you're still standing. Some of those weapons came in the form of family betrayal. Some showed up in abuse, abandonment, or addiction. Some wore the disguise of friendships. Some looked like depression. Some looked like premature responsibilities. But through it all, God kept your mind intact. He held your heart even when it broke. You were under spiritual fire but covered by divine mercy. You've walked through things that would have crushed others, and no one even knows the full story. They see your strength, but not the nights you cried until you couldn't breathe. They see your resilience, but not the moments you wanted to give up entirely. They don't know the weight you carry silently, but heaven does. You've survived betrayal that tried to make you bitter. You've endured silence that tried to convince you God had abandoned you. You've walked through spiritual storms that left others drowning, but still you rise, because you are sealed. You may have doubted it. You may have walked away from it. You may have tried to numb it, but you can't outrun what you were born with. The mark is still there. The calling is still active. The oil is still flowing, even if it's hidden beneath layers of pain. That's why God is speaking to you now. Because the war you've survived is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your authority. You see, only those who have bled spiritually can be trusted with spiritual healing. And you, chosen one, have bled, not always visibly, but deeply, consistently, quietly. And because of that, you carry what others cannot imitate, true power that comes from surviving hell and still choosing heaven. That's why your story matters. That's why your voice must be released. The very thing the enemy tried to shut down is the thing God is about to use. Your testimony will unlock freedom in others. Your scars will become keys. Your weakness will become weapons. The places where you were wounded will become places where others are healed. So I ask you now, what tried to kill you? What lie tried to bury you? What voice tried to silence you? Look it in the face and tell it, you chose the wrong one. And as a prophetic response to what you've just read, comment below, I'm the proof. Because you are. You are the proof that pain doesn't erase promise, that trials don't cancel truth, that no matter how fierce the fire, the chosen ones always rise with the evidence still intact. You're not the exception. You're the testimony. You didn't just survive. You became living proof that God still seals, still saves, still sends. This is not a coincidence. You're here because heaven needed you to remember. The attack began early because the assignment began earlier. And the proof is standing right here, breathing, reading, awakening. There's something few people talk about when it comes to being chosen, the weight of responsibility that comes with the mark. Most admire the calling, but underestimate the cost. They see the favor, but not the fire. They assume you were simply favored above others, but you weren't just favored. You were called to a higher standard, and that standard has never been optional. While others seem to move through life with ease, breaking rules, blending in, living however they please, you've always been pulled back. Conviction has stalked your steps. You couldn't get away with what others did. When you strayed, the silence from God was deafening, not because he was angry, but because you were set apart. And what is set apart cannot be treated as common. Chosen one. The seal on your life demands holiness. It demands alignment. It demands obedience, not out of fear, but out of purpose. You are called to walk differently because you carry something sacred. You are not just a vessel, you are a carrier of divine movement. And God will never allow what he has sealed to be diluted by the world's contamination. There were moments when you asked, why can't I just be normal? You saw others compromising, walking in open sin, and still thriving, or so it seemed. But every time you tried to drift into their rhythm, something in your spirit would lock up. Peace would vanish. Everything would feel off. You'd try to push through, but heaven would resist you, not because you were unwanted, but because you were deeply wanted. The standard on your life is different. The Lord commanded in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26, "You are to be holy to me because I, the Lord, am holy, and I have set you apart from the nations to be my own." Oh, this isn't just a call, it's a covenant. God didn't just invite you to holiness, He claimed you for Himself. That's why your life keeps getting interrupted every time you try to go your own way. Many have mistaken God's correction in your life as rejection, but they don't know what you carry. You can't live loose when you've been sealed for glory. You can't walk with the crowd when heaven has called you out from it. You are bound to a standard not by religion, but by revelation. The closer you get to your assignment, the narrower your path becomes. Others may, but you cannot. Others can play with fire and come out laughing. You play with fire and feel the flames burn straight through your spirit. Others can treat worship like routine, but when you worship, something inside you breaks open, because your worship isn't just participation, it's intercession. It shifts things, it moves things, and that's why your heart must stay clean, your walk holy, and your soul submitted, because the mark on you is not casual, it is costly. You've probably asked God, "Why is my process so intense?" It's because of what He's preparing to place in your hands. You are not being punished, you are being purified. And purification doesn't happen in public. It happens in private. God will strip the distractions, sever relationships, expose idols not to hurt you, but to build you into someone who can carry the weight of what's coming. This is why your life has had seasons of extreme isolation. Why relationships keep getting sifted. Why, even in rooms full of people, you often feel alone. It's not that something is wrong with you, it's that the seal on your life is screaming for integrity. It cannot rest in a space that is contaminated. And so, God keeps calling you higher. You were never called to imitate what's trending. You were called to represent what's eternal. That's why mediocrity doesn't sit well with your spirit. That's why lukewarm teaching grieves you. That's why you can't sit comfortably in shallow places. Because you are not shallow. The depth of your spirit is crying out for more. And hear this, the standard is not a burden, it's your protection. God knows what He's hidden in you, and He refuses to let you sabotage it with compromise. His correction is His kindness. His restraint is His mercy. Every time He blocked a door, ended a connection, it wasn't cruelty. It was preservation. You carry too much to be mishandled. You were never chosen to blend in. You were chosen to walk differently, speak differently, live differently, not to appear superior, but to stay surrendered. Because the oil on your life flows from obedience, and obedience is what activates the fullness of what God has marked in you. So, no, you don't get to live like everyone else. You get to live like someone who is chosen one. Don't confuse being hidden with being forgotten. You've looked around and seen others celebrated, platforms rising, voices amplified, and yet yours has been silenced. Your obedience has been costly, your sacrifice unseen. You've been faithful in the shadows, and still the spotlight passed over you. But what if I told you this was heaven's design? You were not rejected. You were preserved. Hiddenness is not punishment, it's preparation. God doesn't hide worthless things. He hides what's holy. He hides what carries weight. He hides what the enemy wants to destroy too soon. And that includes you. Think of David. Before the crown, there was a field. Before the throne, isolation. Before Goliath, obscurity. He was anointed while still smelling like sheep, overlooked by his own father. But heaven knew. The oil still found him. Just because man doesn't see you doesn't mean God has forgotten you. You are not invisible. You are undeniable. In God's time, Jesus declared in Luke chapter 12, verse 2, "There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." Endo, your hidden season has an expiration date. God is not hiding you forever. He's hiding you until the right moment, the right platform, the right audience. And when it comes, no force in hell will be able to shut it down. You've asked, "God, why are you letting them rise while I remain unseen?" Because you're not being raised for performance. You're being forged for purpose, and purpose takes longer to prepare. Some are built for crowds. You are being built for nations. Some are trained to speak. You are being trained to shift atmospheres. The silence you've endured has been sacred. The loneliness you've carried, it wasn't failure. It was refinement. There are things God had to cut off before you reached visibility. Motives he had to purify. Entanglements he had to sever. Because you're not just representing a message, you're carrying his presence, and he won't share his glory with compromise. You've been through too much to rise too soon. You've been trusted with pain, with loss, with unanswered prayers, not to weaken you, but to anchor you, because shallow roots cannot support heavy crowns. And the crown on your life is not plastic. It's weighty with purpose, with intercession, with authority that comes from surviving the silence without selling your soul. Heaven knows when to reveal what it has hidden. God's not trying to hurt you. He's protecting the oil. Because what's coming can't be mixed with ego, with entitlement, or with performance. You had to die to all of that in the cave. You had to learn how to be okay being anointed, but unnoticed. That's what keeps your oil pure. Listen closely. Your name is already being whispered in rooms you haven't entered. Your obedience has already made noise in the spirit realm. What you thought was obscurity was really heaven building your character to match your calling. So no. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not forgotten. You are right on heaven's timeline. But don't misread this moment. This is not the time to quit. This is not the time to water down your worship, to shrink your prayers, to second-guess your worth. This is the time to press deeper, to remain faithful, because the same God who hid you will be the same God who announces you. And when he does, it will be suddenly, doors will open that no man can shut. Suddenly, the thing you've been praying about for years will manifest in a day. Suddenly, the people who overlooked you will wonder how you rose. But it won't be your strength. It will be your obedience. You didn't network your way in. You endured your way through. If this message is resonating with your spirit, if you know you've been in a season of divine hiddenness, don't keep this to yourself. Like this message as a sign of agreement. Share it with another chosen one, still wrestling in the shadows. And if you haven't already, subscribe to stay connected to what heaven is pouring out here. And if you've been blessed by this word, and you feel led to sow into this movement, you're welcome to give. Not out of obligation, but out of agreement. Agreement with the anointing. Agreement with the mission. Agreement with the truth that hidden ones are being called out, one by one. You can find the link in the description below. This isn't just a channel, it's a lifeline for those walking through the dark, carrying oil, and waiting on heaven's release. So, breathe again. Chosen one. The silence wasn't your sentence. It was your sanctification. And what God has hidden in you is about to speak louder than anything that's ever tried to silence you. You were never forgotten. You were hidden for glory. The greatest battle of your life has never been about your surroundings. It's been about your identity, long before you knew what a calling was. The war began over who you believed you were. The enemy didn't attack your car, your job, or your finances first. He went after your mind, because if he could corrupt your sense of identity, he could delay your destiny. And for a season, it almost worked. He whispered lies into your soul at a young age. You're not good enough. You're unlovable. You're too broken. You'll never be whole. You don't belong anywhere. And those lies didn't just come in thoughts, they came in experiences. Rejection that felt personal. Abandonment that felt like confirmation. Abuse that stole your voice. Environments that trained you to settle. And all of it worked together to make you question the very thing God stamped on your life from the beginning. This one is mine. And if fall, your identity was never meant to be built from pain. It was meant to be rooted in purpose. But the enemy hoped, if he hit you hard enough, you'd stop asking, "Who does God say I am?" and settle for what the world or your wounds told you instead. But chosen one, you're awakening now. The fog is lifting. The lies are losing power. And the truth is being restored. You are not who trauma said you were. You are who heaven called you to be. Paul reminds us in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago." Lambri, you are not random. You are not an accident. You are a masterpiece, carefully formed, deliberately placed, uniquely marked. God didn't mass-produce you. He crafted you. Everything about you, your voice, your discernment, your fire, your tears, it all speaks of intentional design. That's why your warfare has been so focused on your sense of self. That's why, when you tried to rise, something always tried to remind you of your past. Guilt, shame, condemnation, regret, all of it trying to drag you back into chains God already broke. But here's the truth. Your past has no authority to name you. Only the one who created you has that right. And He calls you chosen, set apart, anointed, loved, sent. The shift begins when you stop identifying with your wounds and start identifying with His word. Your scars are not your story, they are your evidence. You didn't stay broken. You didn't stay lost. You didn't stay confused. You walked through darkness and still carry light. You've been through trauma and still chose truth. That's not weakness, that's spiritual authority. And when you rise in identity, everything around you begins to align. Your choices change. Your posture shifts. You no longer tolerate what dishonors your destiny. You no longer chase what doesn't reflect your worth. You begin to walk with a holy confidence, not pride, but clarity. Because when you know who you are, you stop needing validation from people who don't understand your mark. Chosen one. The reason you've struggled to fit into certain rooms is because your spirit was never designed to shrink. You were called to disrupt, to ignite, to shift things. And when you walk into a place unaware of who you are, you dim yourself to survive. But now is not the time to survive, it's the time to stand. You don't need another confirmation. The fact that you're still here, still breathing, still reading this, is proof that God hasn't changed his mind about you. Everything he said over you still stands. And he's calling you to come out of agreement with the lies and step fully into the truth of who you are. So speak it aloud. I am chosen. I am marked. I am sealed. I am not the lie. I am the legacy. Because the moment you believe it is, the moment everything starts changing. Let this message be your mirror. Look into it and see the real you, not the version shaped by fear, failure, or rejection, but the one God authored in eternity. There's fire in your bones. There's royalty in your blood. There's purpose in your steps. You are not who they said. You are not who the pain said. You are who he says. And now, as a prophetic act of agreement, comment below the number 444. Why? Because 4 is the number of divine foundation, and God is rebuilding your identity on his truth, not the rubble of past lies. Every 4 is a declaration. I'm not starting over, I'm starting true. This is your turning point. Identity reclaimed, voice restored, purpose remembered. You are not becoming someone else. You are becoming who you really are. Chosen one. You need to understand something very clearly. Your life has never been random. Your pain has never been pointless. The path you've walked, as winding and brutal as it has been, is full of prophetic fingerprints. Every moment of suffering, every closed door, every detour was allowed not to destroy you, but to reveal what heaven placed inside you. You've asked questions like, why me? Why did I have to go through that? Why was my path so hard while others seem to have it easy? And the answer isn't punishment, it's purpose. The reason your life has carried more weight is because you carry more weight in the spirit. That weight hasn't been visible to others, but it's been deeply felt by you. You've felt it in your bones, in the way people misunderstand you, in the way you love deeply but are often left behind, in the way your prayers carry burdens you don't even know how to explain. It's not imagination. It's not oversensitivity. It's the burden of the marked, because you were never ordinary, even before you understood who you were. Helded. That's why the attacks on your life started so early and came so fiercely. You've endured things most wouldn't recover from. You've carried wounds you never chose. You've lost things that can't be replaced. And yet you're still standing, still breathing, still believing. That alone is evidence. As Paul wrote in his second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 7, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. You are the clay jar, fragile in places, cracked in others. But the treasure, that's the part hell fears. That's the anointing you carry, tested, refined, matured in fire. It's the light that leaks through the cracks. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to yield. You've lived through seasons where it seemed like nothing made sense, where prayers went unanswered, where the heavens felt silent, but you kept showing up. You kept pressing in. You kept whispering, yes, even when everything in you wanted to say, no. And that's why heaven trusts you. Because chosen ones aren't just anointed, they're proven. What tried to destroy you only revealed what couldn't be shaken. You are more than your survival. You are proof of preservation. God didn't just keep you alive. He kept you aligned. He didn't let you drift too far. He didn't let your heart grow too cold. He didn't let the pain erase your calling. He let the storm come. But he anchored your soul before it hit. Every unanswered prayer shaped your endurance. Every betrayal taught you how to discern. Every delay built your faith. Others were promoted quickly. You were processed thoroughly. Because God isn't just calling you to function, He's calling you to carry. And when you carry something sacred, your training doesn't look like theirs. Don't resent the process. Reverence it. Because the deeper the roots, the greater the fruit. And your roots go deep. Deep in prayer. Deep in surrender. Deep in silence. That's why people can't figure out how you're still standing. It's not because you're strong, it's because you're planted. And you need to hear this. Nothing you've walked through will be wasted. Not one tear. Not one heartbreak. Not one sleepless night. God bottles every tear, records every prayer, redeems every pain. What felt like delay was divine calibration. You weren't late, you were being loaded. Loaded with discernment, with authority, with revelation, with fire. That's why you don't respond like everyone else. That's why shallow conversations drain you. That's why your spirit gets stirred in places others find entertaining. You carry too much oil to settle for crumbs. You were designed for depth. And depth requires digging. That's what your pain did. It dug into the layers of your soul to find what was eternal. It stripped away the false labels. It peeled back performance. It exposed every dependency, until all that was left was God in you, the treasure in the jar of clay. Sonu, your story isn't light. It's not easy. It's not polished. But it's real, and that's why it carries power. People don't need rehearsed religion. They need raw redemption. And your life is the sermon. You were never meant to fit in because you were never common. You were never meant to walk easy roads because you were called to carry uncommon glory. So when the enemy tries to remind you of what you've lost, remind him of what you've gained. Endurance. Oil. Identity. Fire. He should have stopped you when he had the chance. But now, you know who you are. You know what you carry. And no one can take that from you. Chosen one. You may not see it with your natural eyes. But the moment you entered this world, you disrupted the unseen realm. Your arrival sent tremors through spiritual dimensions. Heaven rejoiced. Hell trembled. Why? Because you weren't just born, you were assigned. The seal on your life is not decorative. It is disruptive. And because of that, your existence has been under surveillance since day one. There is a reason the opposition has felt so strategic. A reason the warfare hasn't just been external, it's been internal. Mental battles, emotional heaviness, unexplained resistance, people turning on you, doors closing. It's because you are not just seen in the natural, you are visible in the spirit realm. You are watched by angels assigned to guard you and war on your behalf. Watched by demons hoping to distract, discourage, and derail you. Every step you take in alignment with your calling causes movement in both realms. Your obedience doesn't just change your life, it shifts atmospheres. This is why the pressure has felt so intense. You've walked into rooms and felt things before anyone spoke. You've sensed burdens that weren't yours. You've discerned danger where others only saw fun. That's not paranoia. That's prophetic sensitivity. You were born to disturb darkness not by force, but by presence. Light doesn't need to scream to be felt. It simply enters, and darkness must respond. That's why you can feel spiritual agitation in certain spaces. That's why some people are repelled by you. It's not personal, it's positional. You carry what confronts what others hide. You may have blamed yourself for always being the outsider, but what felt like rejection was often spiritual resistance. Your life contradicts darkness. You can't fake normal when your presence exposes what's hidden. You weren't designed to camouflage. You were born to confront, not with arguments, but with light. And light doesn't ask permission to shine. It simply shows up. That's why the enemy tried to mute you with insecurity. That's why fear tried to shrink your personality. That's why trauma tried to silence your discernment. Because if you ever realized the weight of your presence, you would stop hiding. And when you stop hiding, darkness loses ground. You have no idea how many atmospheres have shifted because you walked in. How many generational curses shook when you broke agreement with them. How many rooms have been disturbed because you carry consecration. Hell doesn't fear church attendance. It fears awakened vessels. And you, chosen one, are awakening. As written in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 7, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. You're not just watched, you're covered, surrounded, guarded. God has placed heavenly forces around your life to secure your steps. Even when the battle feels invisible, it is no small thing when heaven marks someone to disturb cycles and break patterns. That's what your life is doing even when you don't realize it. You're not just battling for yourself. You're battling for bloodlines, for futures you haven't stepped into yet. This is why you've felt pressure that doesn't match your position. Your assignment is bigger than your title. It's also why your warfare feels heavier when you're doing little things. Because in the spirit, nothing you do is small. Every act of obedience creates openings. Every time you choose prayer over pettiness, purity over popularity, you cause a ripple that reaches further than you know. You carry atmospheric authority, not because of charisma, but because of consecration. And this is why your process has felt so lonely. You're not just a person, you're a portal. Through you, heaven reaches into places long held in chains. Heaven has trusted you with this weight. With that trust comes awareness. The enemy's strategy is subtle. If he can't destroy you, he'll distract you. If he can't curse you, he'll clutter you. Because when you walk in clarity, everything changes. You were born to walk into places and cause demons to tremble, not because you shout louder, but because your life is in order. Your thoughts are submitted. Your heart is clean. Your posture is bowed before the one who sent you. This is not pride. This is spiritual identity. When you know who you are, you stop reacting to every attack. You start governing from the throne you were called to. The world sees a quiet soul. Heaven sees a warrior. Hell sees a threat. You are watched for a reason, because you carry weight in realms unseen. Chosen one. Obedience has cost you more than words can express. While others saw your sacrifice as overreaction, heaven saw it as worship. You've walked away from what was comfortable. You've laid down what was logical. You've let go of people, positions, and platforms, all because something in you whispered, "This is not the way." No, and even when you didn't fully understand why, You obeyed. That's not weakness. That's power. Because true obedience never feels easy. It doesn't always come with applause. It doesn't always come with understanding. In fact, the most powerful acts of obedience are the ones done in secret, when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when everything in you is breaking, but you still say yes. You've obeyed when it hurt. You've obeyed when it was lonely. You've obeyed even when it cost you your reputation, your convenience, your comfort. And God saw it all. He marked every step. He counted every tear. And none of it has been wasted. It is written in the book of Philippians, chapter 2, verse 8. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. This is your model. Jesus himself didn't just obey when it was easy. He obeyed unto death. His surrender wasn't cheap, and neither is yours. You were never called to live a convenient faith. You were called to carry a costly one. That's why the narrow path feels narrower for you. That's why others can compromise and still seem blessed. But when you even think about drifting, conviction grabs hold of your spirit. Not because you're condemned, but because you're called. Your obedience carries generational weight. You're not just saying yes for you. You're saying yes for those who will come after you. Your surrender is building altars your children will stand on. Your discipline is opening doors they won't have to fight for. The war you're winning now will become peace they inherit later. That's the cost of the mantle on your life. It's not always visible. It's not always celebrated. But it's always eternal. And yes, there are days when it feels unfair. Days when you wonder why your obedience seems to bring more warfare than reward. But don't misread the resistance. The enemy doesn't fight empty vessels. He fights those carrying destiny. The warfare isn't proof that God has abandoned you. It's proof that He entrusted you to hold the line when others folded, entrusted you to carry the fire when others sold out, entrusted you to remain holy in a culture obsessed with compromise. You are the remnant, the set-apart ones, the obedient ones, and your yes is shaking things you cannot see. There are blessings that haven't broken open yet, not because God is withholding, but because He's waiting until your heart is fully ready, until your motives are refined, until your posture is pure, because the weight of what's coming demands integrity to sustain it. Don't despise the delay. Heaven is not late. Heaven is precise. And your obedience is preparing you for what cannot be rushed. And hear this clearly. Every time you obeyed and saw nothing change in the natural, something still shifted in the spirit. You'll find out one day how many traps your obedience dismantled, how many cycles it interrupted, how many enemies were silenced, not by your shouting, but by your yes. That's how powerful your surrender is. That's how sacred your obedience has become. Chosen one. If the enemy could stop you, he would have, but he couldn't, and he won't, because your yes is stronger than his attack. Your surrender is louder than his accusation, and your heart belongs to the only one who writes your end from the beginning. So keep going. Keep choosing what costs. Keep walking the narrow road, even when it's lonely, even when it's misunderstood, even when you're tired, because this road ends in glory, and your obedience is the incense that's rising before the throne. And now, if this word spoke to the depths of your walk, if you feel the fire of conviction and confirmation, then respond with this declaration in the comments. Still obey. Just 3 words, but they echo through eternity. They tell heaven you're not backing down. They tell hell you still know who you are. They tell your own soul that your yes is still alive. This isn't performance. This is covenant. Because, chosen one, your obedience is shaking realms. Chosen one. There is a moment in every marked life when silence breaks, when the hidden becomes revealed, when what was shaping you behind the curtain suddenly begins to manifest in the open. And for you, that moment is now. You are being activated, not by a platform, not by a person, but by heaven itself. You've spent years being sharpened in silence, trained in secret, tested in places where no one was watching. And maybe you thought nothing was happening. But that's because growth doesn't always make noise. Sometimes, heaven grows you underground like roots pushing deep beneath the surface until the time is right. And now, the time is right. This isn't just another season. This is a divine activation, not emotional hype, not religious ritual. A holy yes that comes from the depths of your spirit, where obedience meets assignment and oil meets fire. God is not waiting on the world to validate you. He's waiting on you to recognize what He's already deposited. The delay wasn't denial, it was development. And now the door has been opened. Not because you pushed it, but because you're ready to carry what's on the other side of it. You've been through too much to waste this moment. You were never called to warm a seat or blend into the crowd. You've been entrusted with assignment, with authority, and with a voice that carries weight in the spirit realm. And now, that voice is being awakened. What you thought was silence was actually heaven's breath hovering, preparing, refining. And now it speaks. Go. Go where? Wherever God sends you. Do what? Whatever God tells you. Fear what? Nothing. Because the one who calls you is the one who has already gone before you. As Jesus told his disciples in the book of John, chapter 20, verse 21, as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. This is not theory. This is transfer. You are being sent, and you don't need to feel qualified. You don't need a microphone, a degree, or a social media platform. What you need, you already have: a willing spirit and a sealed assignment. Let this be clear. This activation is spiritual. This is not a call to ambition, it's a call to surrender. Because when God activates someone, He doesn't promote their ego, He releases their obedience. This is about becoming a vessel that heaven can trust, one who won't touch the glory, one who won't compromise under pressure, one who understands that power flows through purity. You've been entrusted because you've been tested. You've been trusted because you've been crushed. You've been chosen because you said yes when others walked away. So now, the tables are turning. The silence is lifting. What was once buried in the hidden place is rising to the surface with holy fire. You may still feel nervous. You may still feel small. But heaven sees readiness. Don't look at your circumstances. Look at your spirit. Because God doesn't activate your calling based on comfort, He activates it based on alignment. And you, right now, are in alignment. That's why this message found you. That's why your heart is burning. That's why your hands are starting to tremble. The signal has been released. You are being deployed. And listen carefully. This isn't just about your breakthrough. It's about your responsibility. Someone else's freedom is tied to your obedience. Someone else's deliverance is tied to your voice. You were never just being prepared for yourself. You've been forged for others, for regions, for families, for people who don't even know your name but are waiting for your yes. This moment matters. And if this word has stirred something deep in you, if it feels like it was written for you, then don't keep it to yourself. Like this message as a mark of agreement. Share it with someone else who needs to wake up to their assignment. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because what God is building through these words is bigger than a single video. It's a movement of the marked. And if you feel led to partner with what's being built here, to sow into this message, this mission, this divine release, then you are welcome to give. Not out of pressure, out of alignment. When you sow into oil, you don't buy blessing, you come into covenant with it. And heaven honors covenant. This is bigger than algorithms, bigger than platforms. This is a moment of awakening, one that heaven orchestrated, one that no darkness can cancel, one that has your name written in light. You've waited, you've wept, you've wondered if God still remembered. And now He answers not just with comfort, but with activation. Rise up. Chosen one. Speak. Move. Pray. Write. Build. Lead. Go. Not in your own strength, but in the name of the one who has sent you. The days of hiding are over. The days of shrinking are finished. The oil has matured. The voice has been forged. The mantle is falling. You are being activated, and nothing will ever be the same. Chosen one. If only people knew the price behind your oil. If only they saw what it cost you to carry what you carry. The anointing on your life didn't come from a prayer line or a conference experience. It came from pain. Deep, personal, unfiltered pain. The kind of pain that leaves you on your knees, gasping for breath between sobs, wondering if God even hears you anymore. But even in that silence, something sacred was happening. Your oil was being pressed. There is no shortcut to true anointing. The most powerful vessels are the ones who've been crushed, the deepest. And yes, you've been crushed. Not once, but repeatedly. The betrayals, the disappointments, the heartbreak, the moments you were loyal to people who were disloyal to you, the seasons where your prayers seemed to echo into emptiness. These weren't just emotional wounds. They were holy pressures. Because oil is not produced in ease, it's produced in crushing. Every time you forgave when you had every right to hate, oil was pressed. Every time you stayed faithful when it would have been easier to walk away, oil was pressed. Every time you worshipped with tears running down your face and pain in your chest, oil was pressed. That is why what you carry now is not ordinary. Your words don't just encourage, they cut through atmospheres. Your presence doesn't just inspire, it shifts the room, not because of you, but because of what was forged inside you through fire. As the psalmist wrote in the book of Psalms, chapter 119, verse 71, "It was good for me to be afflicted, so that I might learn your decrees." And this kind of understanding doesn't come from classrooms. It comes from caves, from crushing, from seasons where the only thing left was God, and even He felt distant. And yet, you kept going. You didn't quit when you could have. You didn't turn bitter when the betrayal was personal. You didn't sell your gift to the highest bidder. You remained broken, maybe weeping, often, but anchored, because somewhere deep inside, you knew that this pain wasn't permanent. You knew that your suffering wasn't without meaning. You knew that what God was doing in you was far greater than the comfort you had to give up. So, you kept walking, even when your feet were bleeding, and that is where the oil came from. Now, people may look at your life and see strength. They see confidence. They hear your voice and feel peace. They receive your prayers and get breakthrough. But they don't see the backstory. They don't know that the wisdom came from weeping, that the fire came from loss, that the clarity came from confusion, that the anointing came from agony. You paid in silence for what they now see in public. But don't resent it, because that pain has positioned you in a way that nothing else could. It made you soft toward people and fierce in the spirit. It made you compassionate yet unshakable. It taught you how to bleed without bitterness and lead without ego. You are the way you are, not because of ease, but because of endurance. And now, your oil carries assignments. It's not just for you, it's for others. The same way you were comforted, now you'll comfort. The same way God met you in the midnight hour, you will now carry that presence into the midnight hours of others. Your oil will break yokes not because of eloquence, but because of authenticity. That's why your voice is so needed in this hour. Not polished, but pure. Not perfect, but proven. Not loud, but full of authority. People don't need to be impressed. They need to be impacted. And what you carry impacts, not because it's flashy, but because it's been fired in the furnace of affliction. The oil you carry is rare. It's not surface-level inspiration. It's been tested. It's been wrung out of seasons of betrayal and loss and surrender. And it drips off your life in the way you love, the way you listen, the way you show up for others when no one showed up for you. You didn't become this overnight. This didn't happen because of applause or attention. This happened because you let God do the painful work when no one was clapping. You said yes in the dark. You said yes when it cost you. You said yes when it emptied you. And now, that yes is flowing, quietly, powerfully, like oil. Don't ever diminish what it cost you. Don't ever forget that the crushing was not the end. It was the beginning. What broke you, birthed you. What bled you, shaped you. What emptied you, filled you. You didn't just survive it, you were transformed through it. So when people ask, how do you carry that presence? You'll know the answer. I bled for this. I wept for this. I obeyed when it cost me everything. This oil isn't cheap. It never was. Chosen one. You've likely wrestled with this more than you admit. Why am I so often misunderstood, especially by the very people I've tried to help? You give. You support. You pour out. You speak truth with love. And yet, instead of gratitude, you get silence, coldness, sometimes even betrayal. And here's what's hardest. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones you were assigned to, the ones you interceded for, the ones you believed in when everyone else walked away. You carried them in prayer, in counsel, in spirit, and still, they turned their backs. It's the kind of pain only the marked ones know. It's the sting of being rejected, not because you did wrong, but because you carry something holy, and not everyone can handle what you carry. You were not misunderstood because you lacked clarity. You were misunderstood because your spirit speaks a language not everyone is ready to hear. When you walk in the light, your very presence confronts the darkness others are still making peace with. And when they're not ready to surrender it, they push you away. It hurts. But it's also confirmation. The rejection wasn't proof you failed, it was proof you were assigned. If they hadn't seen the oil, they wouldn't have resisted it. If they hadn't felt the weight on your life, they wouldn't have been offended by it. You don't stir resistance because of who you are in the natural. You stir resistance because of what you activate in the spirit. As Jesus said in the book of Luke, chapter 4, verse 24, "Truly I tell you, continued, no prophet is accepted in his hometown." End of. Even Jesus was rejected by the very people he came to help. Not because he lacked love, not because he failed, but because familiarity breeds resistance when the Spirit isn't ready to honor the anointing. You are in good company. You were never called to be everyone's favorite. You were called to be faithful. And sometimes faithfulness looks like standing in the tension of being both called and cast out, anointed but avoided, sent but silenced, trusted by heaven but tested by people. But here's what you must remember. The rejection you experienced didn't disqualify your assignment. In many cases, it protected it. Because had you been embraced by the wrong circle, your voice may have been diluted. Your fire may have dimmed to keep others comfortable. And God loves you too much to let that happen. That's why certain doors never opened. That's why some conversations dried up. That's why invitations stopped coming. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were too set apart to stay where compromise is normal. The lonely path you've walked, it's not punishment, it's positioning. And in that loneliness, God has refined your discernment. You no longer chase rooms where you're merely tolerated. You've learned to recognize when your spirit is shrinking. You've learned that peace is more precious than proximity. And now, you walk with wisdom, guarding your space, protecting your oil, and refusing to apologize for carrying what costs. Let this sink in. The same people who rejected you may one day come back, not to validate you, but to receive from you. And you'll be ready, not bitter, not proud, but full of grace. Because the mark on your life doesn't just set you apart, it makes you a safe place. Even for those who once didn't understand you. So no, you're not too sensitive. You're not too intense. You're not too much. You are simply too awake to be handled by those still asleep. And now, if this message is stirring something in your soul, if you know this path of being misunderstood and misread, of loving deeply and losing much comment, the number 555 below. Why 555? Because 5 is the number of grace. And triple grace means this: grace to endure, grace to release, and grace to rise again. Your journey has not been in vain. Every misunderstood moment was shaping the mercy you now carry. Every rejection was creating space for God's redirection. So stand tall, chosen one, even when they walk away, even when they misjudge your motives, even when they cannot see your heart, because God does. And heaven keeps record of every time you loved well, even when it wasn't returned. The misunderstood are not forgotten. They are set apart. And one day, those silent seasons will make sense. The distance will prove divine. The rejection will look like redirection. And you'll realize you were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be obeyed by God. And you did. Chosen one. There's a kind of silence that only the marked ones understand. It's not the silence of being ignored by people. It's the silence of God Himself. You've been there. You've prayed and heard nothing. You've obeyed and seen no confirmation. You've fasted, interceded, cried out, and all you got back was silence. And the hardest part? You still believed. You still stayed. Because deep down, something in you knew God wasn't absent. He was just quiet. What most don't understand is that silence from God isn't always rejection. In fact, more often than not, it's a sign of trust. He's watching, testing, not to harm you, but to reveal what's really inside of you. When the applause stops and the goosebumps are gone, silence is heaven's way of asking, will you still obey when I whisper nothing? Will you still follow when there's no confirmation? Will you still worship when you feel absolutely nothing? You don't grow in the shout, you grow in the silence. That's why your silent seasons have been sacred. You were never being ignored. You were being sharpened. Every unanswered question was shaping your faith. Every day without a word was training your ears to hear deeper. God wasn't talking to your feelings. He was training your foundation. Look back. You didn't fall apart when the silence came. You wanted to. You nearly gave up. But something inside of you wouldn't let go. Something deeper than emotion. Something more powerful than feeling. It was the root system of the chosen. You kept showing up. You kept praying. You kept holding on to promises that hadn't come to pass. And in doing so, you became unshakable, not because you always heard God, but because you chose to stay even when He said nothing. That's the kind of obedience that hell can't explain. That's the kind of surrender that makes heaven smile. There were moments you thought God was punishing you. But what if the silence wasn't punishment? What if it was proof that you'd graduated from needing signs to simply walking in trust? It is said in the book of Job, chapter 23, verse 8 through 10, "But if I go to the east, He is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find Him, but He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Oh, that's you, walking through shadows with no sound, but still moving forward, still obeying, still trusting that the God who sees in secret will reward in the open what many call dry, heaven calls deep. Because only the deeply rooted can survive when the wind of silence blows. Only the truly surrendered can continue without confirmation. Only the trusted can be left without instructions and still build what God said months or even years ago. God will often test what you do with the last word He gave you before He releases the next one. Can you carry out the assignment even when the heavens are quiet? If you can, you've stepped into spiritual maturity that most never reach. You've become stable in stillness, and that's dangerous to the enemy. That is, because you're no longer driven by sensation. You're no longer led by emotion. You're anchored in truth. And you've proven that even without the next sign, your heart stays bowed. That kind of resolve makes you unstoppable. And though you've felt isolated, know this: you're not the only one. Every great prophet, every trusted vessel, every chosen one has walked through silence. Moses in the wilderness, Elijah in the cave, Jesus in the garden. The silence doesn't mean you're off track. Sometimes it means you're right where you should be. The enemy wants to use the silence to sow doubt. Maybe God changed His mind. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I'm not really chosen. But you didn't miss it. You didn't fall behind. You're not abandoned. You are being refined. In this stillness, God is strengthening your spirit, breaking your need for external affirmation, deepening your wells, making sure that when He does speak again, you're not just excited, you're ready, because the next word will be heavy. The next instruction will be costly, and only those who have learned to walk through silence will know how to carry what's spoken in power. Sonu, don't despise the silence. Lean into it. Let it refine you. Let it expose the noise within you. Let it build a kind of faith that doesn't flinch when the sky is quiet. God is not ignoring you. He's entrusting you. He knows the way you take. And when this test is over, you will come forth not confused, not empty, but as pure gold. Chosen one. Have you ever wondered why you feel things before they happen? Why your heart grows heavy without explanation? Why your spirit stirs at moments others ignore? It's not a personality trait. It's not random. It's the burden of a watchman. You are not just called, you are posted, stationed in the spirit to perceive, to protect, to pray. Not everyone is given this burden, because not everyone can bear the weight of it. But you, God saw fit to assign you not only a mantle, but a sensitivity that cuts through the surface. You've never been able to live blind, even when you tried. Your spirit still saw. You discerned motives no one else noticed. You felt spiritual tension others laughed off. You knew when something wasn't right, long before the proof ever showed. And for a while, you may have questioned yourself. You may have silenced it to blend in, but that gift was never meant to be muted. It was meant to be activated, because God did not create you to coast. He created you to cover. You are a spiritual guard in places others sleep. You feel the tremors of transition. You sense the approach of warfare. You carry intercession in your bones. You're awake when others are asleep, not just physically, but spiritually. And that weight has made you tired. Not just physically tired, but soul tired. Because spiritual watchmen rarely get the luxury of rest when heaven is ringing alarms. But you're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not imagining it. You are awake by design. God has given you eyes to see and ears to hear, not to elevate yourself, but to protect the space He's planted you in. That's why your sensitivity has often felt like a curse. It isolates you. It separates you. It draws suspicion. But what feels like isolation is often divine insulation. God hiding you from voices that would try to corrupt your clarity. Because when you are called to see, the enemy will always send noise. He'll send distractions, people with poisoned agendas, false prophets, drama, religious guilt, anything to dull your discernment. Because if he can't blind you, he'll try to blur you. But you've seen too much, felt too much, known too much in the spirit to go back to sleep. This is the price of the mantle. Loneliness, sleeplessness, burdened prayers, prophetic grief. And while others are busy with surface things, God keeps pulling you deeper, calling you higher, stretching you wider. You're not allowed to settle, because you were designed to sense. And yet, even in that calling, you must remember, you are not the Messiah. You're a messenger. You are not the Savior. You are a servant. The weight is real. Yes, but it's not yours to carry alone. There is a fine line between discernment and anxiety, between intercession and control. The enemy loves to exploit your sensitivity and twist it into heaviness. But remember this, your job is to watch and warn, not to carry outcomes you were never meant to control. Jesus said in Mark chapter 13, verse 37, "What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. You are doing what he commanded, watching, interceding, staying awake while others sleep. But don't forget to rest in him. You were never meant to be awake without abiding, because your discernment doesn't flow from pressure, it flows from presence. When your spirit begins to feel heavy, don't assume it's failure. Often, it's simply the weight of what's coming next. Prophets feel the storm before the clouds form. Intercessors sense the shaking before the world ever notices. And chosen ones are called to stand in the gap, the place between what is and what must be. That gap is uncomfortable. It's lonely. It's stretching. But it's holy. In the spirit, you are standing on walls, standing between family and destruction, between churches and confusion, between generations and judgment. You are sounding the alarm, even when no one wants to hear it. And God honors that. No one sees the tears you cry after the prayer call ends. No one hears the groans you release when words fall short. No one understands the weight you carry when you say, "I'm fine," but inside, you're breaking under the burden of what you've seen in the spirit. But God sees, and He's the one who assigned you. He knew what it would cost. He knew what you'd lose. And still, He chose you. So lift your head. Watchman, your vision is not in vain. Your burden is not too much. Your tears are not wasted. You are not overlooked. Heaven knows your name and the role you play in this hour. You are not just chosen. You are trusted. Chosen one. There is something powerful stirring in the atmosphere, and you can feel it. It's not hype. It's not imagination. It's divine movement. You've sensed it in the shift of your thoughts, in the stirring of your spirit, in the way certain things don't sit right anymore. You're not restless without reason. You are being repositioned. And when God begins to reposition you, it often starts with disruption. Old alignments fall away. Familiar spaces become uncomfortable. What used to satisfy now feels empty. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that elevation is near. But elevation in the kingdom doesn't look like applause. It looks like surrender. It looks like secret decisions no one claps for. It looks like sacrificing comfort for obedience. Again and again. Even when no one sees it but God. And yet, that kind of sacrifice never goes unnoticed by heaven. Your obedience has not been wasted. Your quiet yes has not gone unheard. God has seen every internal battle, every temptation resisted, every moment you chose humility over hype, holiness over acceptance. And now, the wind of transition is blowing. You're not just stepping into a new chapter, you're stepping into your assignment with clarity and confidence. The fog is lifting. The fear is breaking. The oil is flowing. But listen closely. This next level of calling will require next level discernment. Not everyone can go with you. Not every open door is heaven sent. Not every opportunity is aligned with your assignment. This is the hour to filter everything through the Spirit, not through emotion, popularity, or urgency. Because where God is taking you, purity is your passport. And I know this level of obedience costs more. The stakes are higher. The warfare is sharper. But so is your vision. So is your strength. So is your clarity. God has been preparing you in hidden places for visible impact. What was once underground is now rising. As declared in the book of Romans, chapter 13, verse 11, the hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. Chosen one, this is your wake-up moment. You're not here by coincidence. You're here because heaven is confirming what you've been sensing for weeks, maybe even years. It's time. Time to stop shrinking. Time to stop second-guessing. Time to step out of the background. Time to speak. Time to build. Time to lead. Time to carry what you've been entrusted with. You were never created to be passive. You were born for movement, born for momentum, born for boldness, and now it's breaking out of you, like fire in your bones, like oil on your hands, like wind in your lungs. There's a generation waiting for your obedience, a family depending on your surrender, a region that needs the weight of your yes. This isn't just about your breakthrough, it's about what your breakthrough will break open for others. If this message is igniting something in your spirit, if you know it was written for you, then like this, post to seal your agreement in the Spirit. It's not just a tap, it's a mark, a declaration that says, I hear you, Lord. Oh, then share it. Because someone else is one, surrender away from remembering who they are. Your share could be their wake-up call. If you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss a word that God is pouring through this space. This isn't content. This is consecration. A flow of oil reserved for those who recognize the time and season. And if you feel led to go deeper, if the Lord is prompting you to sow into what's happening here, then don't ignore it. You're welcome to give, not out of pressure, but out of alignment. When you honor what feeds you, heaven takes notice, and your seed speaks louder than your silence. But more than anything, respond. Respond in the Spirit. Respond in faith. Respond by typing in the comments below, I rise with oil. Len, 3 words, but they declare war on stagnation. They speak resurrection into your calling. They tell darkness you've awakened. They tell heaven you're ready. You're not rising by accident. You're rising with the anointing that cost you everything. Don't wait to be invited. You've already been chosen. Don't wait to be applauded. You've already been appointed. This is the moment where the hidden ones arise, where the marked ones move, where the prepared ones step into the space they were always meant to occupy. This is not ambition. This is alignment. Let the world stay confused. Let the enemies stay mad. Let those who doubted stay silent. You know what time it is. You were born for this moment. And your crown is not coming. It's already been placed. Now walk like it. Chosen one. You've likely lost track of how many times you've started over. How many times you've stood at the edge of a new beginning with trembling hands and a wounded heart. How many times you've had to rebuild on the ruins of what was once sacred. But here you are, still standing. And that alone is evidence. You are not ordinary. Others collapse under what you carry. Others stop at the first storm. But you've walked through fire and emerged with fire in your eyes. You've been refined, not ruined, sharpened, but not shattered, knocked down, but never destroyed. There's a quiet strength in you now, a resilience birthed in war, a wisdom that only pain can teach. You don't just quote the promises, you embody them. You don't just sing the songs, you live the lyrics. Because everything you've endured has taught you how to war differently, not with volume, not with anger, but with stillness, with authority, with discernment. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer beg, you decree. You no longer wonder, You walk in holy certainty. Even when the path isn't clear, you've learned that real faith isn't loud. It's anchored. It's unshaken by delay, undisturbed by the silence of others, and unmoved by the approval of crowds. And that, chosen one, is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. The enemy doesn't fear those who scream spiritual phrases with no foundation. He fears the quiet ones, the ones who rise before dawn and pray when no one sees, the ones who fast in secret, the ones who worship while bleeding, the ones who refuse to be offended, the ones who don't quit even when it hurts. You've become that one. But don't let the scars make you hard. Don't let the journey make you bitter. You weren't built just to survive. You were built to transform. Not to become numb, but to become powerful through holy empathy. Because the oil you carry is for others. The wisdom you've gained is not for pride, it's for purpose. There are people who don't need your perfection, they need your story. They need to see someone who made it through that pain, that betrayal, but that season, and still kept their eyes on heaven. Your scars aren't shame. They're signs that you've wrestled with lions and didn't lose your roar. As written in the book of Micah, chapter 7, verse 8, "Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light." Yes, you've been pressed, but you've never been empty. Yes, you've been struck, but never surrendered. Yes, you've been abandoned by people, but never by God. There were nights you wept into your pillow, thinking no one saw you, but heaven recorded every tear. There were days when it took everything in you just to get out of bed, and still, you showed up. Still, you moved. Still, you gave. Still, you believed. That kind of resilience doesn't come from this world. It's supernatural, heaven-born, a sign that the Spirit of God lives in you and refuses to let go. Others may not understand your strength because they never saw your struggle. Let them misjudge. Let them underestimate, because what's coming next will leave. No doubt God is with you. You didn't come this far to blend in now. You weren't preserved through hell just to settle for mediocrity. There's a weight to your walk now, a purpose to your presence. Your mere survival is a message, one that preaches louder than any platform, because when you walk into a room, heaven walks in too. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove it. Just your endurance has authority. Just your existence brings conviction. You carry evidence not of perfection, but of perseverance. You are the sign that God still resurrects. You are the proof that oil flows from ashes. You are the sound of victory wrapped in human skin. Chosen one. Your survival wasn't accidental. It was strategic. You were kept, not just for restoration, but for dominion. God didn't just pull you out of the pit, He's calling you to reclaim territory. Your tears watered the soil. Now it's time to occupy what others abandoned. Let this be the chapter where you stop explaining your fire and start walking in it. Let this be the season where you stop mourning what was lost and start building what is next. You've survived enough. Now it's time to reign. Chosen one. What you've been through wasn't just about your pain, it was about your positioning. You didn't just survive the wilderness, you were shaped by it. You weren't forgotten, you were forged. In the hidden places, in the lonely places, in the long, slow grind of obedience when nothing around you seemed to change. And now, Now you're carrying something different. You don't just walk into rooms anymore. You shift atmospheres. You don't just pray with emotion, you pray with authority. You don't just talk about breakthrough. You've become the breakthrough. Your life is the evidence. Not because it's perfect, but because it's proven. And that's the difference between those who are called and those who are commissioned. Many are called, but few endure the breaking, the pruning, the silencing, the misunderstanding. The divine delays long enough to be trusted. And now, heaven has trusted you with more than a message. You carry a mantle. That's why things have felt so heavy lately. You've stepped into a place where the weight of your life no longer reflects the warfare of your past, but the glory of what's coming. The pressure isn't proof that something's wrong. It's proof that something holy is forming. And the more pressure you feel, the closer the outpouring is. This is not a season of survival. This is a season of release. Everything that has been pressing you, testing you, stretching you, has been preparing the ground, not just for a personal blessing, but for a spiritual commissioning, a public confirmation of what heaven already whispered over you in private. This is the hour where hidden oil comes into visible operation, the season where long-held words are fulfilled, the moment where God says, "Now," end quote. You've waited long enough, and while others may look at your life and see the surface, heaven sees the roots. The way you held on to truth when lies tried to drown you. The way you stayed in worship when warfare surrounded you. The way you chose stillness when noise tempted you to fight back. That's why you're different now. You've been made dangerous not to people, but to systems of darkness. You don't react like you used to. You don't flinch like you used to. You don't chase validation like you used to. Because the wilderness broke what ego couldn't touch. The fire burned off what pride couldn't confess. And now, you're not just called, you're ready. It is written in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Oh, that's not just a comfort. It's a command. Because what's ahead of you isn't small. It's not light. It's not safe. It's sacred. And it will require strength. You will need strength to stay planted when distraction calls. Strength to walk in humility when elevation comes. Strength to speak boldly when others stay silent. Strength to move forward, even when your flesh wants to retreat. You're not entering a playground. You're stepping onto a battleground, but this time, as a warrior who knows who they are. Not a wanderer begging to be chosen, because you've already been chosen. Chosen to carry weight. Chosen to lift others. Chosen to speak when others remain quiet. Chosen to rebuild ruins that didn't start with you. Chosen to break chains that didn't begin with your name, but will end with your obedience. The generational curses, they stop with you. The silence in your bloodline, you will shatter it. The lost mantles in your family tree, you will recover them. You are not the echo. You are the voice. You are not the aftermath. You are the answer. And as you step forward, don't look for crowds. Don't measure your impact by applause. Your obedience is your measurement. Your assignment is your compass. And heaven is your audience. The same God who walked with you in the crushing will walk with you in the commissioning. The same voice that whispered to you in the dark will roar through you in the light. The same hand that held you in your wilderness will fight for you in your promised land. This is not the end. This is the activation. You are not just stepping into purpose. You are stepping into dominion. Not because you chased it, but because you were faithful when no one was watching. And now, all of heaven is watching. So walk with oil, with fire, with reverence, with confidence, because what you carry isn't light. It's glory. Chosen one. If your spirit is burning, it's because this wasn't just a script, it was a summons. Heaven didn't bring you here for entertainment. Heaven brought you here for activation. You've just walked through 17 sections of holy fire, 17 waves of awakening, 17 confirmations that you were born for this exact hour. And now that you've received the word, the only question left is, what will you do with it? Because this moment demands a response. Not someday, not later. Now, if something in this message pierced through your soul, don't just scroll away. Like this message as a bold act of agreement. Let heaven and hell both know, I hear you. Lord, I'm awake. Share it with someone whose spirit needs reviving. Don't assume they'll find it on their own. You might be the voice God uses to shake them loose. If you haven't already, subscribe, not just to stay connected, but to stay aligned. This space isn't about content. It's about consecration. Each message is a prophetic flow, tailor-made for the marked ones like you. And if the Lord is prompting you to partner, tosof, to give into the oil that's been flowing here, don't delay. This isn't about pressure. It's about positioning. Every seed sown into obedience becomes a statement in the Spirit. I honor what heaven is building. Finally, drop a comment below to seal what's been stirred. Type this declaration, I'm stepping in. Because that's what this moment is about. Not hesitation, not delay, but divine movement. This isn't just the end of a script. It's the beginning of your next chapter. Walk boldly. You're not empty. You're crowned.